Hey guys, welcome back to some more AFK Journey. Today's video, we're going to be breaking down the wish list as it sits today. Now, of course, it is going to be very dependent on the heroes that you have the ability to summon. For majority of us, we've gotten to the point where we're starting to see heroes. We're starting to see kind of the tier priority of where we do have to build them, swapping them out in the hands of residents. But what heroes should you be focusing on and which ones are the top tier? We're going to go ahead, hop over, break down this tier list. Let me know what you think in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. So let's go ahead and check this out. All right, guys, so here is the tier list over on Tier Maker. Now, overall, I want to run through the heroes that are in here because, again, it's going to be also very dependent on the heroes that you do pick up. So the first one we're looking at is Smokey. Now, Smokey, of course, if you are fighting a team that has an interrupt, Smokey unfortunately will not have the healing aroma, which means that the effectiveness of the hero will go down. But when it comes to big picture, looking at AFK Journey, he is the absolute #1 priority when it comes to a support hero in this game. Super, super effective. And essentially what you can do with that aroma aura is you can position him in different places, allowing him to actually be super effective in a couple different game modes. And of course, when you look at the boss fights, super effective as well. When you look at the battle drills, you want him in there. He is an absolute priority when it comes to AFK Journey. Then we look at Odie. Now, Odie, of course, when it comes to the Dream Realm, priority #1 when it comes to damage, when it comes to single target damage, he can pretty much outperform anyone within this list. It's kind of crazy to see how broken this hero is. Now, of course, as you build him up further, the stronger that he gets, the better he is going to perform, especially when you unlock the signature item in here. Makes a really, really big difference when you get to that point of being able to break out the actual builds of these heroes. And again, seeing exactly where they are kind of built. Then, of course, we have the best tank, and by far the literal best tank, which is Thorin. Now, Thorin, absolutely broken, not only with the retaliation ability, but the ability to take damage and also the ability to resurrect. So for a majority of tanks, they get kind of burned down in this game, which is the reason we're not seeing them super effective. Now, overall, Thorin is a face tank. Now, what we mean by that is he is going to go toe-to-toe. He is going to be right in the thick of it. He is going to be taking damage from a lot of different sources, meaning that heroes like Rowan and Smokey can keep him up. Even if he does happen to take fatal damage or burst damage, he is going to be resurrected, which again is a really, really cool ability. And of course, similar to the other heroes, as we continue to build them out further, they are going to effectively do more damage and be more effective within a lot of different game modes. And then when you do get that item unlocked, it's going to make a really big difference. Now, when we start looking at our Celestials and Hypos, this is Dynel. So overall, Dynel, it seems like super effective within the PvP aspect. Now, he is a Celestial Marksman. Again, damage-wise, does incredibly well. I've used him once or twice, seen him in a couple different game modes, and it doesn't seem like super effective. I believe, again, with the Celestials and Hypos, you do have to have him built up quite a bit. But I've done a couple where I've helped out other players, and we've used him a couple. And again, not having him really built out very far didn't seem super effective, but I do like how he looks, and I like his build in there. I feel like when you get him built up a little bit further, he is going to be super effective. And then, of course, the #1 and the biggest priority to build when it comes to the Hypo is Rainier. Rainier, of course, is a support hero, magic damage support hero, and a Hypo. This is the one that you want to build. This is the one that has the most utility within AFK Journey. Again, getting to mid-game, getting to end-game. He is going to be one that is going to be in a majority of formations, making him super, super effective. Now, the next one we look at is Vela as we get into this S tier. Vela overall really works well in a couple different modes. We know right now it is kind of the desired hero summons or the rate up summon that a lot of players are getting her out of. And unfortunately, she's not available to put in the wish list. But overall, when it comes to the utility of this hero, not only the range damage, but also the short-term damage when she actually changes her form, does a lot of damage. Now, of course, PvP, a lot of players have said that Vela is the absolute broken hero that we see within PvP, which I got one copy of her, effectiveness of her. I'm going to have to see personally exactly how effective she is. But looking at the tier list, putting her in the A slot. Then, of course, we have Tamisa as a tank. So as a light bearer tank, probably one of the effective, very effective heroes within AFK Journey. Big thing with her is she doesn't really tank, but she offers not only a considerable amount of damage, but she also does a lot of crowd control to the back row heroes, which is the exact reason why we built her. Again, she's not going to stand toe-to-toe as a tank and fight like a Thorin will, but overall the effectiveness of this hero, and I have her built out quite a bit, I believe already at Mythic, it is very effective in a lot of different game modes. Then we look at Corinne. Corinne, of course, has to be built up a little bit, but when it comes to that Dream Realm, does a lot of damage in a bunch of different game modes. Also, the effectiveness in PvP is pretty well there. Then we look at Merrily. Merrily ranged, moves around the combat, moves around the battlefield quite a bit, does burst damage if you can get her built up a little bit, working incredibly well in the boss modes. Again, when you look at maximizing your damage, and of course, maximizing the damage in there is going to yield a lot more loot out of a bunch of different game modes. Then we have Shakir. Now, Shakir, of course, a pretty broken hero. Most players are using Shakir as a off tank. So where you might have Thorin as the face tank, as the primary tank, Shakir is going to be the off tank that we see in a lot of AFK Arena and does work very, very well in a bunch of different game modes. Then we kind of get into the S to the A tier. A tier is Seth. Again, Seth kind of fills in very similar to what we see Shakir, just kind of at a lesser level as an off tank. And again, it depends what battle or what combat that you're in, depending on exactly who you're going to use utility wise. If you're running Kruger in formations, it really does make a big difference on who you're running. Then we get into probably one of the biggest heroes that I underestimated. I did not build Coco very early, but looking at how broken she is within the Mauler Tower and a lot of other game modes, the effectiveness of this hero does work incredibly well, which is very impressive to see that she is doing very well. Now, again, a very similar build to Scrag. We see spears in there, but we see healing, we see buffing, we see a lot of support from this hero. Then we have Brienne. Now, again, this is a newer, wilder hero. If you guys played on the PTR, Coco wasn't here, Brienne wasn't here. There were a few that were not originally released, even Timisi, that were not released with the original AFK Journey rollout. But since we've seen these heroes, they are coming in the top tier, and they are newer heroes to AFK Journey. Damage overall does burst damage right at the very beginning. Then, of course, he has the bird doing a lot of damage in formations. And if you're like me, looking at Cecilia, Cecilia is probably one of the strongest heroes. It just kind of broken because of the crowd control aspect. That's really the big thing when you start getting into higher level deficiencies, when you start getting into higher AFK levels. She is the one you need because of the crowd control aspect, the entanglement that Mr. Carlisle does within there. Again, works incredibly well, does some pretty good damage. But what I've noticed is having like OD and having Cecilia, most of the heroes, even looking at Merrily, looking at Corinne, most of the heroes have far exceeded the amount of damage that Cecilia is doing, which keeps her out of that S tier. But again, that crowd control is very effective. Then, of course, we have Igor. Now, Igor is one, again, that I kind of underestimated at the beginning. If you have fought Igor, Igor is an absolute nightmare to try to deal with because of the tombstones and going from tombstone to tombstone. Very hard to kill, does a considerable amount of damage, and it's cool the methodology behind him because essentially some of the enemies can run and chase this hero around in different formations, which again makes him kind of elusive in there, but it gives your range damage or even your support heroes the ability to heal the team or continue doing damage to the team before you actually get killed out of there. Then, of course, we have Scarlita. Now, Scarlita is a warrior, a celestial warrior, so it is the second within the celestials, and you can kind of see how we're doing it. This hero is damage. Now, of course, it creates an AoE damage, so it's very systematic on how she works. Overall effectiveness, she is, again, very similar to what we see with Shakir, we see with Seth, has to be one tile away. There is no range for this. They are going right in kind of as an off tank, kind of like what we see, but doing a lot of damage in game modes. Of course, with the Celestials, like I said earlier, does have to be unlocked, which is super difficult in this game, but also does have the ability to do a considerable amount of damage within the game. Now we start getting into the B tier. And of course, my boy, my favorite one from AFK Arena, Rowan is in there. And essentially, when it comes to the support heroes, we have Rowan, we have Coco, we do have Smokey. They are pretty much the primary ones that we see in here with a lot of utility going through, again, a bunch of different game modes. Their effectiveness is pretty high through a bunch of different places. And of course, where if there's a lot of interrupts, if there's a team where we're seeing a lot of stuns, a lot of crowd control, a lot of lockdowns, I will drop Rowan in the formation and actually take out Smokey. It works very effective to have both of them built. Then, of course, a majority of these heroes you do need built for the towers. So there's going to be very specific heroes that need to be built for the towers so you can actually make a lot of progression. Now, looking at the next one with his Cassidy. Cassidy overall with the mages. And I don't know what is going on with the mages in AFK Journey, but overall, they are not super effective outside of the PvP aspect. They're not really being used that many places. And then also looking at our light bearers and our wilders, they're another pair or classifications that are not being used in very much content at this point. It seems like the other two primary factions, the Greyborns and the Maulers, are just pretty broken. I don't know if that's going to change in the future, but it would be pretty interesting to see. Now, as we look at Kruger, which is, of course, the only Mauler we have in here, Kruger you need one copy of. There'll be a point later where you do have to kind of build them up a little bit further. And even like AFK Arena, I think of like a Mortis or, as like a Warwick in there. He has a big physical defense down, which amplifies the damage, but you don't need a lot of copies, but you do have to keep him alive. Essentially, if he's dying out early, you're not going to have the ability to do a lot of damage in game modes because a dead warrior does no damage. You're not going to get the debuffs out of there, which means eventually out of that one copy, you are going to build up Kruger a little bit further. Then we have Iran again for the Wilders, effective with the Tornado, the ability to bring all the heroes together. Again, the effectiveness of this hero, because we're pretty limited to who we have. And of course, he is a rogue. So very interesting that they did put him as a rogue or a ranger within this game, making a big difference with how they're kind of built. And then we have Heowyn. Heowyn ultimately is the Wilder support. So when you think of the Wilder heroes and you think of the support, she is a priority. She is one that you're going to run through, again, a lot of different content. Also going to be run when it comes to the Wilder Tower as your main support hero, which is in there. And then we have Granny. Granny, of course, is the tank. When it comes to the actual tanking ability, again, similar to other games, it seems like a lot of these heroes just get kind of run over pretty quick, which is pretty sad to see. But overall, when you look at a tank, this is kind of similar to what we see like in Olmus. So it has a little bit of tanking ability, has a little bit of crowd control ability. So overall, again, the effectiveness is not really there because when it comes to higher damage, she will actually get just bursted down pretty quick. Then we have Damien. Again, Damien, another support hero in this faction. I would look for Heowyn, but of course, these heroes fall into that S tier or that S classification, where this hero falls into the A classification. So you can actually go in and build a couple of these heroes out and be super effective within a few game modes, depending on who you need. So essentially, if you don't have the ability or if you miss pulling out Heowyn, you can sub in Damon, and that will be kind of the substitution in there. Then, of course, we have Leica falling in the B tier. Leica has the attack up, has the haste buff, very similar to what we see with AFK Arena. And then, of course, Arden has the thunderstorms, has the lightning, again, falling very similar to what we see within AFK Arena. Then we look at Parisa. Again, another mage hero effective within the PvP aspect. Don't see her used a bunch of different places. Again, the effectiveness of this hero, we still have to find a place, if there is ever found a place, with these mage heroes and essentially the effectiveness that we do see within there. Now, then we look at Coraline. Now, this is a very interesting hero that we see. So Coraline actually provides a considerable amount of crowd control as a mage because there is a freezing ability and you can actually target specific heroes to go ahead and freeze these. Now, a lot of players have said, looking at Corlina, I think it's Corlina. Looking at Corlina, effectiveness is very, very, very late end game to have this hero built. Unfortunately, it's another hero where you do have to have the hero built out considerably high to see the effectiveness in there. And overall, is she really worth investing in? Possibly for the tower for that crowd control aspect, but only time will tell exactly where the effectiveness is going to come. Then we have Naru, which, interesting enough, Naru is support. A lot of players don't realize that, but when it comes to Greyborn, we don't have a ton of support in there. So Naru being in that A class, definitely worth building out just for, again, that support aspect. Now, unfortunately, as a support hero does go toe-to-toe like we see with some of the other ones, meaning the ability for this hero to really die early is pretty high, and that's what I've kind of seen from using him. Even within the tower, he does die out pretty quick. Then we have Beryl. So Beryl is a rogue, and it is the hypo rogue with magical damage, which again, kind of interesting. When it comes to the Celestials and the hypo, he is the lowest one, the lowest priority to build. And again, overall effectiveness of this hero, not really too high at all. Then we start getting into the C tier. So looking at the C tier, we have a few different heroes in here. And overall, again, kind of the effectiveness starting with Faye. Faye is a support hero, which Rowan is much higher. There's a couple that work incredibly well in there. A lot better, a lot more effective in a bunch of different game modes. Then, of course, we have Mariel in here. Mariel, again, falling in that mage classification, not seeing a lot of utility, which is unfortunate. I think there's going to have to be a point where some of these heroes are going to have to be buffed up just for that support hero. And then we look at Rias. So Rias, of course, another newer hero that we see to AFK Journey, is a marksman. But again, the effectiveness of this hero, there's a lot of heroes that are essentially in that S class that have a lot more effectiveness than what we're seeing out of some of these heroes. Then we have Brutus. That is right. Big Mac Daddy Brutus. You only need one copy of him, very similar to AFK Arena. The shielding aspect that he has is what you're looking for. We've seen him in the tower video. The Whirlwind ability, the ability to move during Whirlwind is really cool with this hero. And of course, he has the immunity. He has a lot of defensive capacity as a tank, which is exactly what we like. And then we look at Entendre. Of course, Entendre does fall into that A class, so the lower class, not the S class. The A class does have a shielding ability, but overall, her and Brutus run together do work, and it does work pretty well, especially if you have a couple other heroes like Shakir or Coco that can fall into that formation and really keeping them alive, as well as Smokey can make a very, very strong Mauler combination. Sylvana, unfortunately, again, goes right to the enemy side. What we see traditionally, even with her now, is when she goes to the enemy side, even utilization in the tower, dies out pretty quick, which is pretty sad. I don't know if it's going to require her to be really built, but even at a lower level, I'm not seeing the effectiveness of Sylvana at all. And then we have Viperion. Overall, this hero is very, very heavy AoE, which means tower's going to work very well. But overall effectiveness in boss modes, we're not seeing at all. Doesn't do a lot of damage single target, but when it comes to overall with the effectiveness of multi-target, does do pretty well. And then we have Salazar. Salazar, again, a rogue. So you're really catching the drift of these tier lists where rogues and mages, not a ton of effectiveness. We're seeing really the tank support and of course the marksmen, which are just taking the gold trophies home with everything they do. Then looking at the very bottom tier, unfortunately, Walker drops in here again, guys. The effectiveness of the hero, and players were saying, I hope that he is super overpowered when it comes to AFK Journey, but unfortunately, that is not the fact. And the first one we have, though, is Atlanta, which is a marksman. Again, effectiveness of this hero in a bunch of different game modes. If you're lucky to get some early copies, which I don't recommend, not even putting her in the wish list. Again, the effectiveness is not really there. Same with Lucius. The tanking ability gets really run over. The shielding aspect in there is pretty good. As a tank, he can really only off tank or have a lot of crowd control in a team formation. Again, unfortunately, in some of the game modes, it's very hard because if you're running like a Temsia, you have to have a tank and you have to have someone to actually hold the line. Unfortunately, Lucius is the only one that kind of fits that bill. Walker, like I said, not effective really in any game modes. And then looking at our little free hero that we get, of course, out of there, the effectiveness, again, of the hero not being super effective in a bunch of different game modes. But again, you do get some free copies of the hero when essentially early you see them. But again, the effectiveness in there, not super high, not a hero that you really want to prioritizing. And for some reason, I'm drawing a blank on the name. It's Valen. That's right. It's Valen is his name. Not super effective in the game mode. Damage is relatively low when it comes to looking at kind of the counterparts and everything in there. The damage for this hero does come in quite low. Then we look at Lumont. Lumont, unfortunately, has a little bit of the crowd control, the pushback, the knockback. But again, within that tanking aspect, or I believe this is a warrior, I think as the warrior aspect, we do see the hero die out pretty quick, which is the same with Satrana. Satrana, unfortunately, we do see die out pretty quick as well. So not really a big driving force to build out that hero. And then we have Khafra, of course, which finishes out the tier list. Again, when it comes to the effectiveness of the hero, not a lot of places to build this warrior, not too effective in a bunch of different game modes, which means even looking at bigger picture, when you look at the towers, when you look at the heroes that we do have in AFK Journey, it's really kind of focused on these first three tiers are going to be kind of your priority. And this is going to be very dependent on the heroes that you do get built out and when you get them built out. So essentially, when you get in here, you want to make sure that you're picking up 1 or 2 tanks. You also want to make sure that you're getting 1 or 2 support heroes. The rest of them are going to come with time, kind of filling in a couple different slots. But as long as you have the fundamental base of the tank and the support, you can fill it in with other heroes that essentially you're going to build over time. Sorry guys, so this is going to do it for today's tier list. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.